put this up on the AEA website for others to view.
I know there's a few ServiceNow people who've got childcare issues that they can't be here. They've asked for recordings.
Right. Great. Well, actually, ServiceNow has the Zoom account that lets you transcribe things. So if you could turn that on, that would be good as well.
Will do.
Thank you. That'd be very helpful. And people can, hopefully, if it works very well, can read about it as well as watch the video.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think I should sort of be official at this point and say, hello, thank you for coming. We're up to 36. I think we'll get a few more, which is when I started doing the, Birgit asked me to do the London chapter to try to breathe some life into it and start having some meetings and things. And we've been going along pretty well. We've got some people who are helping a lot. And Shashanka, thank you for organizing the PR. We do that. We're still learning how this works, and we're not fully mature by any means in the London chapter of the Association of Enterprise Architects, but we're getting there. And we do apologize for the confusion about venues, but we seem to have resolved it. Birgit is with us, and I think, yes, who is the head of the AEA and is in Boston, Massachusetts right now, I think. Birgit, would you like to say something about the organization?
Hi, welcome all. Yes, Dan's been doing a great job since taking over the London chapter. There have been a lot of great face-to-face events, and I'm sure that sometime, maybe next year when we can continue to do that, we'll start doing that again.
Have we lost you? Birgit, we can't hear you.
Your membership, if you want to join, which would be great to get involved in the London chapter since they do put on regular events and have great speakers. So over to you, Dan, and thanks for doing a great job.
Thank you. I think we missed some of what you said, but I believe it was probably encouraging people actually to become members.
Yes, and we are offering a special. So for 10% off membership, we're trying to encourage people to join your chapter. So we're offering 10% off. And they go to the AEA website at globalaea.org and then input the offer. It's May offer, and with the O, capital O, they will get 10% off, and then they can join your chapter.
Okay, maybe you could put that into the chat in case people are interested. With regard to that website, I want to apologize for the confusion about, apparently if you went straight to the WebEx link, you wouldn't have been asked to stop and join the AEA, but actually if you went to the AEA website and wanted to sign up for an event, that you might have been asked to pay something, and that was just a technical mistake. This was always meant to be open, and we welcome all of you. My name is Dan Warfield, by the way. I'm the chairman of this group, and this is our first attempt in cyberspace. It's great. We have 39 people, which is about what we were getting when we were meeting in London, although it's a bit more spread out now. And some people complained when we started this up a year or two ago that, why don't you do it somewhere else besides London? Because I don't live in London, I live in wherever. And we weren't sure how to deal with it. Well, we're dealing with it now. So, and it seems to be great. So we're going to try doing this. And see how it goes. It will be recorded. The format is Michelle's going to give her talk. After that, we will open it up for questions and go for as long as you want to, has been the format we've done. Usually this is a 3-hour meeting, and it breaks up about 9 because people have to get the tube or something, or they'll miss their train, that sort of thing. There's no fixed stopping time for this meeting. And the free drinks and the pizza are not on tonight. Sorry about that. So over to you, Michelle. Michelle is a fantastic person. She is a PhD. She has done some very interesting astronomical work, which we won't talk about here, but she'd be glad to tell you about. She plays the ukulele. She is working for ServiceNow, but has had some other very interesting roles, including working for the Open Group, which is, if you don't know it, the owner of TOGAF, Archimate, and the other IT for IT, all of these standards, Unix. And we're very glad to have her here. Thank you. So I'm going to stop jabbering and say, Michelle, welcome.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you everyone for coming. It's wonderful to see, even though the entire world is melting down, that enterprise architects are still here to make the world a better place. So thank you for turning up. I am going to share my screen and see if I can get this up. Okay, can everyone see it?
Yeah.
All good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am
Yep.
I'm going to be running this from another computer as well. So I'm going to turn off my camera. If you would all like to go on mute, then that would be awesome. But please, if you want to keep your videos on, that's great, because I like to have someone to actually talk to, and it's really good to have some feedback as well. Okay, so let's stop that video. Okay, so here we go. Welcome to the presentation. Welcome to GIS, past, present, and future. So thank you for inviting me to speak today. So for those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Michelle Supper, and I'm a rocket scientist. So the PhD is in astrophysics. Happy to take questions on enterprise architecture or astrophysics afterwards if you like. This is an updated version of a presentation that I gave as a keynote address at the 90th Global Information Society Forum in Tokyo a few years ago at the invitation of Yunkyo Fujieda, who is the head of the Open Group in Japan. It's been my honor to know Jack Fujieda, who we call Jack, for more than half my life. And you'll find out how that has come to be in a few minutes. Now, just before I graduated, I secured a job as a radar engineer. And when I told Jack this happy news, he said, "That's great, but I think it would be better if you became an architect." Now, you don't say no to Jack. And so within 6 months of being a graduate at Thales, I actually became a systems and enterprise architect, which is pretty much unheard of. Usually people don't become architects until they've been in the job for at least a decade. But for me, the last 10 years have been a wild ride. I've spent time as an independent consultant, using enterprise architecture to solve problems for defense, government, public sectors, and 2 years as a forum director in the Open Group, directing more than 1,000 members across 3 forums and helping them to write standards and guides and white papers. Now I use all my skills and experience as a senior executive architect in the Inspire team at ServiceNow, showing our customers the art of the possible and making the world of work better for people. Right, so now onto the presentation itself. Now this is a fairly involved presentation, so if you'd be so kind, please hold your questions until the end and I'll be happy to answer anything then. Okay, so here we go. This is the information age. As technical people in the developed world, it's hard for us to imagine modern life without the internet and global information systems that we depend on every day. This evening, we will look at the predictions we made for the Global Information Society, the GIS, 25 years ago. And I'll show you what we got right and what we got wrong and what we missed entirely. And then finally, we'll look ahead and see how we can ensure that the GIS develops into the secure, flexible infrastructure that we're going to need in the future. So before we discuss the GIS, let's introduce architecture and see how it can be applied. So as an enterprise architect, I see many different types of projects. And usually I'm called in when things have already started to go wrong. Now there are 3 issues that come up all the time. The first one, shown here by this pile of old computer junk, is organic chaotic growth. When a system is new, everything is chosen together and it all matches. And over time, parts of the system have to be replaced or added to. In large organizations, systems can be altered on an ad hoc basis by whoever wants something. And when this is not properly managed, the system becomes fragmented. In the UK, this is a recognised problem in government and defence. Entire government departments, and I've seen this happen, entire government departments have no idea what systems they have, and millions of pounds are wasted on redundant systems and software that nobody uses. The second problem, illustrated here by the Tower of Babel, is that of isolated teams and siloed thinking. Different technical and business teams fail to communicate effectively. This problem causes wasted time as teams reinvent the wheel, fail to share knowledge, and don't benefit from a common understanding of their project. And the third problem is poor business and systems alignment. This issue arises when people ignore requirements and create a product that is totally unfit for purpose. But what is architecture? Okay. Architecture is a logical and formal approach to systems development and business design. And using architecture helps us to solve typical issues that we find on these bad projects. It uses standard frameworks and notations, and these help teams and stakeholders to communicate better with each other. This calm and measured approach ensures that at the end, the product aligns with the requirements of the users. Essentially, architecture is about getting it right on purpose. And to understand architecture in practice, let's look at 3 examples. So my first example is the Watchkeeper program. Now, Watchkeeper was an £800 million unmanned aerial vehicle program intended to replace an older system and support UK troops in Afghanistan. And I worked on this for a little while. It was an urgent operational requirement. It was announced in 2005, but it was only partially delivered in 2014, 4 years late, and only 3 weeks before the troops came home. Design teams were established and budgets assigned before any architecture work had been done. In fact, architecture was not started until 2009, at which point it was too late to deliver the project on time, even if they wanted to. At first, the individual parts of the system failed to integrate, but even when this was fixed, Watchkeeper still couldn't be introduced. Innocent people died because this project failed, and it failed due to a lack of architecture and migration planning. And this is how not to do it. Second example, okay, this one is about architecture guided development. So, SimCLARES is a research program for a multi-UAV, multi-sensor system. So we don't like to use the word swarm, but think about a swarm of UAVs. The project suffered from 2 of the common issues, misalignment and siloed thinking. There were no requirements, and the various research teams in 3 companies across 2 countries did not communicate. The project stalled after 3 years. In 2010, I created a baseline architecture for the project, including validated requirements, systems and operational views, a project taxonomy, use cases, and so on. And these enabled the designers to make evidence-based design decisions and understand how their work fitted into the overall project. The team started to cooperate again after that with a common language and a common design. And using architecture, we managed to get this project back on track. Third example, and we have Adam Gwinnett here, who I was working with on this project, which is lovely. And this is architecture change management. So the third example is a project which I led at the Ministry of Justice way back in the summer of 2014. So the Ministry of Justice manages the prison service for the UK, and it's responsible for the welfare and secure containment of more than 85,600 prisoners, 24/7. You can't turn those systems off and fiddle. You have to keep them on all the time. But the IT systems used to manage the prisons have grown organically for more than 20 years and were pretty much out of control. The ministry was also under pressure from central government to reduce running costs. So my team analysed 31 applications used by the prison service using TOGAF to align business and IT and to identify duplicate and redundant systems. We were able to recommend that 9 applications would be switched off, saving around $500,000 a year, and we exposed huge risks, which, if addressed, would improve the alignment between the prison service and their IT systems. It was an uncomfortable but necessary wake-up call for some of the management team, but the project provided essential information to executives who will be able to make financial decisions for the coming year. In this case, architecture enabled us to effect change without disrupting normal operation of the prison service. So let's go back into the past. And that's a very young Bill Gates launching Windows 95. So, the internet in 1995. While the internet had been around in a primitive form since the 1980s, it was not in common use. In 1995, only 39.6 million people used the internet, and that at the time was less than 1% of the world's population. And they were looking at only 23,500 websites, which is tiny. But it was an idea whose time had come. So all of these things that you can see on the screen were introduced in 1995. The internet is by design dispersed across many servers, but by having shared and agreed international standards, data can be shared freely across the network. When these standards and the global information infrastructure were created, no one knew what the internet would become, but the world's business and political leaders recognized the potential of the new technology and discussed it when they gathered at the 1995 G7 mini summit in Belgium. And at that meeting, Mr. Isao Okawa, who was the chairman of Sega Enterprises, he announced that adults should find out the true needs and visions of children. They will be the future users of the global information infrastructure. He proposed that an event should be held to bring the children of the world together to discuss the new technology, and he called this the GII, Global Information Infrastructure Junior Summit. A competition was announced to select the participants. Entrants composed music or wrote essays on the themes of the summit, these being music, communication, environment, education, peace, and war. 41 winners were chosen, aged 12 to 18, and selected from 10 different countries. So I was chosen to represent the UK, so I won this competition. So there I am, I'm standing to the right of I'm here, see if I can annotate this. This is me here, that's me. And I'm standing to the right of a very young looking Jack Fujieda. It's a bit of a fuzzy picture, but that's Jack, who chaired the summit. We all flew to Tokyo, and I was only 15. That was my first time away from home. And by day, we worked in teams and debated the future of the internet and of the GII. And by night, we used a T1 internet connection, which at the time was the fastest connection to the internet on the planet. And we browsed a handful of pages on the World Wide Web. It was, at the end of the week, we presented our ideas at the summit in front of hundreds of invited school children, politicians, and giants of industry. And it was an incredible, life-changing experience. And some of the discussions that we had, even though we were discussing in many languages around the table, some of the discussions were extraordinarily prescient. So let's have a look at some of the highlights and recommendations that each of those teams made. I need to change slide and it won't let me. There we go. Okay, so the music team. The music team worked online. They composed music online using only plain text email, and they performed their piece, which they called Rengaku, at the summit. Just need to erase these There we go. Okay, so they performed their piece at the summit, and online collaboration at that time was a real novelty in 1995. Now file sharing has become the norm in all aspects of life, facilitated by cloud-based services and collaborative platforms, such as Google Drive, Microsoft SharePoint, of course, ServiceNow as well. It really has become something that we do every day. In fact, we're doing it right now. The education team suggested that the internet should be used in schools and in universities. At the time, of course, it wasn't. When I was in school, we didn't have a computer in the building. Now it's hard to imagine a classroom without one. The team also thought that online learning would be a good idea. This has now taken off, both for children and adults, through training courses, webinars, websites that enable individuals to share their skills and knowledge. And of course, pretty much every child around the world now is learning online as a result of all the schools being closed. Finally, they urged support for the development of the GII in the developing world. Professor Nicholas Negroponte, who is the co-founder and director of MIT Media Laboratory, was at the summit. I met him there, and he was inspired by what he heard. He went on to launch the One Laptop Per Child project, which is a charity which provides internet-ready computers to poor kids all over the world. So far, more than 2.5 million laptops have been given out. The environment team could not find any accessible information about the environment online. So they suggested that the environmental data should be put into a data bank and made available for researchers and lay people to share. Right, well, now this has happened in all academic fields, and researchers have made tremendous advances by sharing and pooling data. Now, if you want to find a research paper, they're routinely published online and they're made available to academics throughout the world. Even old papers have been digitized and uploaded. As a research PhD student, I can't imagine doing my research without the internet. It was, I didn't set foot in the library. The only place to get the information was online. The communication team recognized the need for improved data security and personal privacy online, but they weren't sure how this could be implemented. They also debated whether or not the government should censor the internet, and if the internet should be free for all, or only made available to those who could pay for it. But they couldn't reach a consensus on either point. It's interesting to see that these debates continue to this day, with governments actively blocking certain internet content for all kinds of reasons, from the safety of their citizens to the suppression of political views that could conflict with their own. Finally, the team suggested that the World Wide Web should be written in Esperanto so that everyone could understand it. Now, the idea of using a universal language so that everyone can share their knowledge is truly idealistic. And the choice of Esperanto, which is an entirely artificial language without any political association, is also inspired. It certainly enabled what the Open Group likes to call boundaryless information flow, but it's not practical. We don't all want to learn Esperanto. But it has been fascinating to watch the development of the internet. Now there are many regions of the internet existing like different countries with different languages. And while these areas of the internet are all connected, and while we are all connected, the language barrier keeps users separated. If you're not a speaker of Chinese or Arabic, there are many websites you will probably never visit. And this is, it's not that we have one internet now, we in fact have several internets. It will be fascinating to see how the culture of the world shifts when translation algorithms improve to the point where we can simply go to any website and understand the content. And my group, which was Peace and War, we discussed how the internet could be used to promote peace in the world. We focused on the use of the internet to help build understanding between nations, and we suggested the use of online games to train children in peaceful conflict resolution techniques. I summarized our ideas 25 years ago, it's a long time now, as follows. By encouraging children to communicate today, we can encourage better international relations tomorrow. The potential of the internet to bring peace to the world has not yet been fully realised, but organisations like UNESCO and Coexist, which bring children together from across the religious and political divides, have started to make a positive impact. So, what happened next? Mr. Okawa, the chairman of Sega, took our ideas to the G7 Industrial Roundtable discussions. Soon after, the various countries put in place the supporting infrastructure that will be needed for the internet. Fibre optic cables were laid, and internet service providers started to advertise their services, prompting large-scale adoption. In America, internet use rocketed, reaching 50% of the population only 5 years after the summit, and at around 80% in 2009. So let's have a look at the present. Where are we now? The Earth's population has now grown to 7.8 billion. And every time I give this presentation, I have to update these numbers, and it is terrifying how fast the population is growing. So we now have 7.8 billion humans, of whom around half, that's about 3.6 billion, are internet users. There's also been a massive increase in internet use since 1995. And let's put this in context. Let's look at Facebook. It has about 1.66 billion users every day. And that's more than 40 times the number of users the entire internet had in 1995. The number of web pages has also grown astronomically to more than 1.7 billion. Although around 3/4 of these are part domains or unmanaged websites. Sadly, this is very much about quantity over quality. The internet has grown to the extent that recently we were at serious risk of running out of internet protocol addresses, and a new internet protocol standard, IPv6, had to be rolled out to provide a larger IP address pool. The standards that were developed in the early stages of the internet's development were designed with only a handful of users in mind. Now we use the internet in ways that hadn't been dreamed of in 1995. One of the challenges for future architects will be to ensure that global standards that support the internet remain fit for purpose in the years ahead. But what didn't we predict? 25 years on from the summit, we have the benefit of hindsight. Let's have a look at what we didn't see coming. We did not foresee the media revolution. Okay, so the internet has displaced traditional media in order of increasing bandwidth. First text, then music, and finally film. This has broken the commercial model. In the last few years, physical stores like HMV, Blockbuster Video, and Borders, the bookshop, have closed, and they've been replaced by their online equivalents. So you have BBC iPlayer, YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, Netflix, Amazon, BBC website, and Wikipedia. We now consume data and share it differently. We have seen a cultural shift towards 24-hour rolling news, music downloads, and films on demand. But most of all, as individuals, we have become information rich. We assume a right to data and expect accurate information to be available instantly. If we want a book, we download it. And if we have a question, we Google it. The sum total of knowledge is available to us online. Social media has also emerged. Email, Skype, Zoom, social media services such as Twitter and Facebook have provided new ways of interacting. And thank goodness for that, given the current situation. These ready-made public communication platforms have redefined friendship and have made communication much faster, cheaper, and easier. And they have fueled social uprisings, such as the Arab Spring. Social media has given people a voice and the means to broadcast their views and coordinate their actions. We are also dependent on the internet to conduct our business affairs. Banks and financial markets rely on the internet, using it for trading and cash transfers. We can buy and sell consumer goods, manage our financial accounts online. It is now possible to buy everything you need on the internet and never leave your house. This has really come into its own in the last couple of months. The entire world has been locked down due to the coronavirus pandemic, and many of us have been able to continue working, learning, and even socializing from home. So, what about the negative consequences of the internet? 25 years is not long in terms of human culture, and we are still not used to this brave new world. We can become over-dependent on technology and complacent about the risks of failure. When the Royal Bank of Scotland's systems crashed in 2012 following a botched software upgrade, it inconvenienced 6.5 million customers for several weeks, for which the bank was fined £56 million by the regulators. Social media can also be used for good and bad purposes. Governments have started to recognise the power of social media, and it is now standard practice when faced with civil unrest for a government to shut down social media services in their region. We have seen this enacted on a temporary basis in Egypt, Tunisia, and even London during the riots of 2011. Deliberate censorships can be used to silence dissent. And we see extensive and permanent blocking of web access in China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. It's also made it possible for people with baseless fears to find each other and to reinforce crackpot views, as we've seen in the rise of fake news, the anti-vaccination movement, and more recently with the attacks on 5G masts. The internet has also exposed innocent people to genuine hazards, stalking, sexual predators, and the presence of permanent incriminating data online. People have lost their jobs over ill-judged blog posts and have been jailed for offensive tweets. Clearly, it's going to take time for the legal frameworks to catch up with modern technology. So we have looked at the past and we've looked at the present, but what about the future? What challenges face the GIS? Accessibility is still a major issue. While 80% of the developed world has access, most of Africa and India are still unconnected. In fact, around 60% of the world's population has never used the internet at all. Nations without access to the internet suffer from information poverty and massive inequality between rich and poor. The vast majority of people in these nations tend to be poorly educated, illiterate, and dependent on charity to survive. If the global information infrastructure were extended to the developing world, it would be the catalyst to lift millions out of poverty. It would make knowledge available and provide the information that would help the poor to become self-sufficient. The next challenge is the creation of the Internet of Things, which is going to connect embedded computing devices throughout the internet. Its emergent properties will produce applications that we can't even imagine now. To be a benefit, it's going to have to be simple. It should not be more difficult to perform an action through the Internet of Things than it would be without it. So methods like Kaizen, which is continuous improvement, are going to be needed to keep the system lightweight and easy to implement. Standard interface protocols will have to be adopted so that different devices will be able to communicate. And of course, wireless technology will have to improve to give sufficient speed, bandwidth, and stability. And since all devices will connect individually, IPv6 will have to be more widely adopted to provide enough IP addresses to accommodate all of these different devices. Clouds of data. We're now generating and gathering huge quantities of data. The Internet of Things is only going to add to that. So we're not just talking about big data here, it can be massive data as well, enormous data, huge quantities of data that you just can't imagine. We store it remotely from our own computers now in clouds. Big data is not a problem in itself, since data storage has become easier and cheaper. The real challenge is answering the following questions. What does it all mean? Is it worth keeping? How can we manage the data? And how can we analyze it? Cloud is driving a cultural shift. It offers cheap computing. You only need a simple terminal to access your data instead of a large computer. And it allows you to rent software as a service, instead of owning it. But it puts your data outside of your firewall, and it forces you to trust someone else to look after it. Having data unmoored from the office is also enabling people to work and collaborate remotely. Given that we're all currently working from home, I believe we may soon see a step change in the way we work. And this will have massive repercussions on everything from business etiquette and social interaction to city design and the environment. The more data there is stored on the cloud, the more attractive it's going to be for hackers. ServiceNow, Google, IBM, Microsoft, and other cloud providers have to work hard to protect their cloud platforms from attack, which brings us to the final challenge. Cybersecurity. Our increasing use and dependence on the GIS exposes us to massive risks from cyber criminals, whether exposing secrets on WikiLeaks, taking over our machines with botnets, hacking our personal data, or shutting down access through denial of service attacks. Cyber criminals have the potential to cause chaos and inflict enormous financial and reputational damage. We will never be able to completely eliminate cybercrime, but we will need to find ways to protect ourselves against criminal threats and to reduce the risks they pose. How can we build the future GIS systems? This looks very familiar. The GIS has grown organically. It was created by isolated groups of people with siloed thinking. And at the moment, the GIS infrastructure doesn't align with future user needs. In other words, the GIS is showing all three of the typical systems issues we discussed earlier. To fix these issues and to meet the challenges of the future GIS, we need to use architecture. On the grand scale, the GIS needs a stable architecture to support standards, services, and future innovations. And since the GIS is bigger than any individual organization or any individual country, we're going to have to work collaboratively. On a more familiar scale, when we are developing cloud-based solutions for customers, it would help if we had a common language in which to build and communicate our designs. To achieve this, we could use open standards such as TOGAF, Archimate, IT for IT. And this vendor-neutral approach to enterprise architecture this will help the development of the GIS to be user-focused, aligned to the user requirements, and coherent with the standards all working together. And using this blended approach also provides a common design language that will enable us to communicate our ideas clearly. And as tricky as architecture is, it's much easier to learn than Esperanto. It would also enable us to model, plan, and implement developments of the GIS or of complex customer networks without taking systems offline, because we can plan, we can model, and we can do all of that, plan our changes before we actually implement them. We could also make use of the standards created by the Open Platform 3 Forum of the Open Group, while under my direction and with the help of Don Boncato, who's here with us today. So these are ODEF, ODF, and OMI. And now all of these are in version 2. These non-proprietary open standards are available now and available to be used and downloaded from the Open Group library. And they can be used to ease data transfer between applications and between connected devices in the Internet of Things. So, in conclusion, the GIS has got problems that architecture can solve, but by using open, consistent architectural methods, we can work together, we can create a GIS strategy, and we can build the future GIS for the benefit of all humanity. So, thank you very much, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
So Michelle, thank you for that. Very interesting, and leaves me with a few questions. Before we do that, I'd just like to be sure we are, we're still learning how to have these big meetings in cyberspace. So one of the things we've enjoyed in the London chapter meetings is, which was a surprise and a pleasant surprise, is we would get to this point, and then there would be an hour of discussion, very vigorous, lots of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
So can I suggest that we'll just let it flow, and if we get to the point where where people are feeling unable to speak or it gets too complicated, we can resort to using our co-host to moderate who gets to speak, and but let's do that if we need to. My question, Michelle, is if you could change one thing in this situation you're talking about, you change one thing tomorrow, how would you do that? What would that be? And the other question is, while it's good theoretically to say that enterprise architecture could help with all of this, what's the practical way that that could happen?
Oh, okay. One thing I would change. So going back from my own history, one thing I would change is I would have every child taught how to do web design. It should be part of the national curriculum, and there should be free lessons for the ones of us, those of us who missed out in the first round because we were too young, we millennials and zennials. It's something that's so important, and as we found, putting this presentation together, this webinar, this event, if you try to do anything online, people who understand how to make videos themselves, people who know how to put websites together, they have the power now. And so that's what I would do. I'd make sure that all of us had free lessons to learn how to use this technology, because this is what the future is going to look like. And how would I practically use enterprise architecture? Well, I've been working with the Open Group for 10 years as a member, and also as a participant, and as a staff for a while as well. I would encourage people, wherever possible, to learn these standards and take them seriously. So often when I'm talking to other architects, what trips us up is a difficulty in understanding terminology. It's a kind of rigorous thinking that we really do need to support. We need to understand our role as enterprise architects, and we need to understand the language that we use as enterprise architects so that we can work together and make things better. So that's what I would do. I'd encourage people to look at the standards and learn the definitions.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up?
Don, did you speak?
Yes, please. A follow-up question, Dr. Supper. So given that everyone should have an opportunity or get to learn web development, the next question is what medium would we do it with? Would it be Esperanto? Would it be use the universal translator and speak whatever language you want to speak? Or would it be by priority? Mandarin being first, Spanish being second, and English being third. What would you pick?
With natural language, I would pick whichever language people had, right? At the moment, that's how things work. At the moment, people speak their languages and they speak to their friends, colleagues in the language they speak fluently. There are other developments happening at the moment which enable almost like a universal translator, where language can be translated. Google Translate has come on leaps and bounds in the last few years. There will come a time when artificial intelligence, machine learning, and language and translation gets to a point where websites can just be automatically and very, translated very well. So for natural language, that wouldn't concern me. In terms of the technical development, I think it's important that people technically know how to make a website, how to manage these sites. The fact that 3/4 of the internet is rubbish upsets me. we need to tidy this up. Okay. So I'd like people to learn how to write for the internet, how to present websites, how to align things properly. And if we can make systems that will make it possible for the internet to be a better place, essentially it's an adjunct to our normal physical world now. So having a bad website is a terrible experience. It's a bad user experience. It's a bad customer experience for companies and for our customers. So that really does need improvement.
So Michelle, it's Dave. May I go next?
Of course.
So my question, I guess, is an amber flag, let's call it. As we make it easier and easier for ideas to flow between people, and you've talked about the implications of security, do you have a perspective on the veracity of the information that we consume now? We've seen great examples where people have been led down possibly incorrect paths by information that they should not have trusted, but was a wolf in sheep's clothing in veritable terms. So how do we, as we make ideas easier to traverse languages, cultures across the entire globe, how do we protect the sanctity and truthfulness of those ideas to ensure that we're not being manipulated in some way by another intelligence, whether it be human or artificial?
Yeah, it's a really big problem, and we've seen this a lot, in recent years with with fake news, propaganda. Of course, has been a big thing since certainly since the Second World War. All kinds of fake science and pseudoscience, and the difficulty is there's a lot of people out there who are taken in by it. I find myself often a keyboard warrior these days, fighting against people spouting nonsense about science. It's very difficult when you're faced with somebody who hasn't got an education background, someone who doesn't have critical thinking skills, who hasn't got a scientific education. When they're faced with something which to them looks credible, especially when they're afraid, they will believe it. It's a very difficult problem. There are people in universities and across the world, certainly groups I know in America, fighting this and looking for ways of doing it. And often you have places like Facebook and Twitter, hauled out, and they say, "Why don't you remove all the fake news?" Well, it's very difficult. Even often the fake news contains a grain of truth. How much truth and falsehood does there have to be before you remove something or censor it? And if you do that, then it also starts pushing onto the boundaries of things like free speech.
Yep.
So there are so many different philosophical issues bound up in that. When it comes down to it, though, it's up to an individual. There are two extremes, right? On the one extreme, if you know that someone is out there pumping out false information that is clearly false, then yes, people should take action and have those people removed from the internet. If they're causing damage, if they're taking people down a path which is hurtful to them and causing them harm, then certainly they should be dealt with on a legal basis. If you have people, though, who read something and believe it because they don't have a scientific background or they don't have a knowledge or critical thinking, it's very difficult. For those people, gentle education and guiding is the only thing you can do. You can't fight them. You can't call them stupid. It doesn't help. So the only thing you can do is provide clear, real information as best you can.
Yep, thank you.
May I go next?
Of course.
I haven't heard the term blockchain being used, and I was wondering where that might come into all of this.
Now, earlier, Laura sent me a question saying, "Can I ask questions?" And I said, "The thing I'm afraid of is that you're going to ask me a question I can't answer."
Oops. Okay.
I'm not an expert on blockchain. Where's it come into it? It's another. Do we have any experts on blockchain in the house who want to answer the question? Because I really can't.
I can answer the question in one sense. What it provides is it provides a decentralized trust non-repudiation mechanism. So it provides a way of recording something in a way that can't be changed. Now that's useful for archival purposes, particularly useful for managing financial transactions, but that's pretty much all you can do with the tech. It's been around a lot longer than people think. The ideas certainly were around a while ago, but they were more thinking about doing things like publishing the hash key in the paper record, stuff like that, for recording archive material, and that was one of the ideas that was going around there. But it's not as important the technology as I think people are making it out to be. I think it's one of these things that's definitely going through a hype cycle at the moment. It's right at the peak. I'd like to ask a question as well, actually. I've been around since before what people call the internet, which is really the web. Mm-hmm. And certainly there was a lot of information being exchanged before the web was invented. And we used to use things like Kix and bulletin boards, and you know, we used to use Gopher and all these other protocols that are all completely forgotten now. But one problem you always had with those was the indexing problem. The new indexing problem seems to be that basically you get the things that people pay for, not the things that people are actually true. So for example, if you do a search on Google, the first 2 pages generally tend to be advert results, which aren't actually probably what you were looking for. So what do you think would be an improvement in the control mechanism for that?
An improvement in the control mechanism for Google search algorithms?
No, for the fact that advertising effectively decides what you see on the internet.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. It comes back to the discussions that we were having way back 25 years ago as to who should have access to the internet. Should it be free? Should it not be free? So what's happened is we've gone down the route as a society of having internet that we pay for, and certain aspects of it have been monetized. And yeah, I remember YouTube before adverts, and it was a much happier place. It was much nicer to be able to watch a song without it being interrupted halfway through. And then of course they introduced a paid version of YouTube, so you can watch without having adverts, but if you pay for the honor. It is hard. I mean, Google is, yeah, I find it gives me much better results than other search engines, but then other search engines do exist. If you don't want to use Google, use other ones. And other ones are less monetarily driven. So you have different adverts, different drivers, different priorities that those search algorithms will come up with. The only way I think you can handle this is to vote with your feet and find somewhere which gives you the results you're looking for.
Although, Michelle, one evidence point that maybe takes us a different way is if you look at what's happening with Wikipedia. It's always been sort of one of the versions of the truth, used some of that blockchain style disaggregated control to try and ensure the quality of the data. And now I find I'm sponsoring them as a charity on a weekly or monthly basis. I wonder if we're going to have some sort of cross-governmental organization that can seek funding for broader than geopolitical things. Otherwise, I just don't see how many of these things will continue to sustain, because we still will go down whatever route is the most convenient. And if we have to pay for that convenience, most of my experience would indicate that people will.
Yeah. They'll
take the toll road if it gets them there 5 minutes quicker. So I think that monetization is going to be a really difficult one to crack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, not everything on Wikipedia is true.
Nope.
It is interesting. I remember when I was a kid, if I wanted something, I went to the Encyclopedia Britannica in the library and looked it up, and the quality of information in there was leagues ahead of what you get in Wikipedia. Okay, it might not have been up to date, but the depth of research and citations and the amount of trust that you could have in the Britannica was far greater than you can have in Wikipedia. When I was a PhD student, when I was an arch procrastinator, I was occasionally a wiki gnome. So wiki gnomes are people who go around fixing things on Wikipedia. So I took it upon myself to fix spelling mistakes and various factual errors that I came across. And there are tribes of people who do this, just for fun or to pass the time. So Wikipedia is not perfect. It's useful, but it's not perfect. So I don't know. What would you prefer to support? Something which was definitive, like Encyclopedia Britannica, or something which was ad hoc but useful and up to date, like Wikipedia?
I don't know. Whichever tells me what I want to know.
I think we need both of them. We need a Wikipedia where we have some starting point and we have some facts, maybe not verified, but we also need true facts which everybody can rely on. Let's say if there is any rumor, I will definitely go to BBC and quickly find out whether it's a rumor or whether it is a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Really need true source.
Yeah. Even the BBC has been known to have bias in certain areas. So, you have to be careful which sources you go to.
Yeah, but, vast majority of the things you can straight away find out, so obviously there'll be some bias point here and there, which we, quite, it's very credible. I have never found it otherwise so far. Maybe I was lucky.
I have seen in the chat if Ian is still here. Ian, are you still here?
I'm right here.
Hi. So we're honoured to have Ian with us. Ian Waskowitz was also at the summit with me. Do you want to say anything about that? Because it's very rare that the two of us come together.
Yeah, we tried to connect a few months back, but it didn't happen. I'm happy to take a walk down memory lane and hear your view on the summit. Was certainly a formative moment. I was myself, I think I was 17 at the time, and just finishing high school, and it was a major event to meet all these young people from around the world and think about the future of the internet and about governance and society, and think about where all this was heading. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear your take on it and where you've been since then.
Thank you. It was interesting. At the summit itself, there were 41 of us from these 10 different countries, and we're all quite young. Some of us spoke more than one language, but some didn't. And when we say languages, we're talking Japanese, French, German, Italian, everything. And so we were put in mixed groups according to whichever topic we wrote our essays on. Then we sat in these groups and had discussions for a few days. And around my table, I think we had 6 different languages. And somehow we imagined, I was doing French at school, and my French was better then than it is now. So I could speak to the French Canadian girl who was there and translate for her. And it was just everything. So it was this crazy mix of people trying to communicate around the table. It was quite wonderful. We all found there was a network of common language we could do. The main language was English, but then, for detailed stuff, we reverted to our own languages.
Yeah, it was great. I think that moment in time was a very hopeful one, relating to kind of what technology was bringing us, the world, and societies around the world. And I think that whole vision has definitely been has tarnished a bit over the last few years. It's maybe a little bit more realistic now, and it's interesting to think about kind of the possibility of world peace through communication, which I think your one slide on War and Peace kind of sums up maybe the core ethic of the whole event. And I think a lot of people's positive view of the internet was this idea that simply by connecting everyone, we could make the world a more peaceful place. And I think that, certainly people like Steven Pinker would say that that's the case. Yeah, it's still, the internet is still young. This new world is still young. So there's much work to be done.
Yes, goodness only knows where it'll be in the next 25 years.
Let's see where it's heading.
Anyone got questions out there?
Hi, can I have a go?
Yeah.
So I want to go off on a different track, which is back to your presentation. As an ex physicist, you'll know the concept of entropy and the increasing disorder of systems as they pass through time.
Yep.
And I guess because I'm getting old, when I see presentations where you have a pile of computer parts there, which shows the history of all the bad things we've done, people like Dan and I have been building systems for 40 years. And when we did them, we thought we were being architectural at the time. You have a paradigm about what architecture is at a moment in time, which becomes the next generation's legacy. And, yes, you should build things architectural, but entropy exists. And I'm convinced no matter how much architecture you put into a system, because the paradigm in 20 years' time will be different than whatever we can imagine, we'll look back on what we build now and think, why did they do that? I don't know. It's just...
No, you're getting the wrong end of the stick. Architecture doesn't negate the advances of the past at all. Everything that we do is built on what was previous, always, whether it's in research or if it's in computer design. By the way, if anyone here collects apricot computers, I have a pristine one from the summit. It was part of the prize, and I used it all the way through university, and I've got a pristine British-built apricot Zen PC online if anyone wants it. Don't know what to do with the thing now, it's massive. But these things, the technology, the architecture techniques that I'm talking about can be used at many different levels. When computers were built as standalone machines, when my dad over there used to work in Marks and Spencer's, the mainframe for Marks and Spencer's filled a room, and then it was replaced by a much smaller machine that filled a suitcase. It's like we have to go through the times when computers are big in order to have the times when computers are small. The difference with using an architecture technique, so managing your applications, managing your landscape in an organization, it means that when it comes time to make a business transformation, you know what you have and you know where the risks are, and you're able to instigate change because you can map, you can measure, you understand what you've got. It doesn't mean that what you had was always terrible. It was really good at the time. It's just advances happen. So we have to be prepared. And this is where things like IT for IT come in. So TOGAF is really useful for making that map of your application landscape, so you know what technology you have, when you got it, where the risks are, when something's going to go out of support. That's really helpful. To manage your IT on an ongoing basis, so you don't get into a situation where you have a pile of old stuff that doesn't work. Things like IT for IT with value chain mapping, and you just keep everything going the whole way, and you manage your IT on an ongoing basis. It means you don't accumulate all that legacy stuff. You can maintain your IT in good health. So we can use standards to our advantage without ever disrespecting the advances of technology.
Yeah, I guess that, you see a lot of people saying, well, if only this project had been architected in the first place, it probably was.
It might not have been. It might not have been. Often what you have is something might have been architected initially, right? So, it might have been, when the building was made and everything was perfect, and that first day everything was pristine and everything matched. And then at some point something broke and they couldn't find an exact replacement. They got something that was quite close. And then somewhere else something broke, or someone decided to get the latest thing. Basically over time, that perfect, idealized, pristine thing starts to fragment. It just happens naturally because you can't keep replacing like for like the whole time, and nor would you want to, because that would mean that progress would stop. You'd be stuck forever with your technology at the stage where it was when the building opened. So, we have to progress, we have to change, we have to adapt, we have to move our networks forward, and having grip on that, using architecture, knowing what we have, really does help. When William the Conqueror came into England, the first thing he did was make a map of Monday. He made a list of everything that was in the country. And it was useful because that way you could manage what was here. You can only manage what you've got. So, that's where it comes in handy.
I have a question.
Go, Lou.
So, interesting talk, definitely outside of my field. Still don't fully understand what you do, but that's okay. So one thing I was thinking about is how does the role of information technology and systems fit in with sustainability? Because I work in life sciences, I generate tons of waste every day, lots of disposable plastics. I feel, as I'm getting older, progressively more aware of the damage I'm doing on the environment. And I'm looking around in the pandemic, with everyone being in lockdown, we're seeing things like animals coming back into the streets in Colorado, all kinds of stuff like that. The smog better in LA, the air is better in Beijing. And it's starting to make me think on a philosophical level, at which point do we say too much technology, we need to think about the planet as well? And I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts in computing, which I know produces a lot of, again, plastic and metal. And as you're upgrading systems, waste from that, is there any movement forward in making it a more sustainable practice and better recycling?
All good questions. And once again, there's the two ends of the telescope to look down. So yes, air quality is improving because car use is going down, because people are working from home. And the reason they can work from home is because they're using computers, they can telecommute. They don't, you know, in the last couple of weeks, if this had been a different world, I would have spent a week in Mumbai in India at the Open Group Conference, and then I would have flown over the weekend to go to Florida for the Knowledge 20 for ServiceNow. Instead, because of coronavirus, both conferences were put online. So that's a whole lot of flying that I and many other people didn't have to do. So instead of having 22,000 descend to a place near you for the Knowledge Conference, we've all been online. In fact, many more people have been online because we didn't have to travel. So all those obstacles about travel and accommodation and costs weren't in the way. So many more people were able to attend. So there are very positive aspects to computing, and in that, you know, yes, it uses a little electricity, but the electricity that I'm using to do this talk is far less than it would have been for me to sit on a train in and out of London and so on. So the other aspect is the amount of waste that is generated, and it's not just plastics; it's rare earth metals as well with computers, and you get silicon boards and chips and gold. Huge amounts of gold are used on circuit boards, and trying to extract that is really hard. There are people who try and recycle it. There's nowhere near enough recycling happening. It does need to improve, but it's a very involved job, especially for older computers where there's far more material and screws and things that need to be undone physically in order to actually break it all down and get the elements out. And then you need energy to actually break the stuff down and extract the metals. So trying to make it commercially viable, very difficult. Maybe one day we'll have nanotechnology that, you know, help us to extract stuff in a more efficient way. At the moment, it's not so easy and it's not so economic, which is why it doesn't happen. Hope that answered it. Yeah.
I think obviously this goes without saying. I just wanted to say thank you very much for what you've said tonight. It's been really interesting and intriguing, and it's nice to see another side to you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So are there other questions or things people would like to discuss? Are we running out of steam?
I do have one question. Can I be heard, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's commonly known that, for example, Google is on the brink of deploying the way of quantum computing. And my question about that is, what and how will quantum computing affect the way we do enterprise architecture while utilizing the cloud environment? I can imagine, of course, this will be having quite impact on the security aspect because of the way how quantum computing is doing. But any thoughts about that?
Love it. My friends ask me really hard questions. This is why you're my friends. You try so yeah, quantum computing. I'm not an expert in quantum computing. I know quantum mechanics, so I used to teach quantum mechanics. So the fun thing about quantum computing is it enables you to do stuff a lot quicker. There are many more calculations per second. Everything gets faster. You know, the advantage is everything gets faster. So the amount of calculations that we could do, the types of visualizations, if we were able to have that, yeah, I don't know how it's going to work in practice, but the outcome would be quicker computing. And if you can have the kind of speeds which they're aiming for, things like 3D visualization, would be easy. We wouldn't be doing this with all the different people on the screen. We'd go into a virtual room just because we could. So it gets to a point where the sort of Star Trek levels of computing is what you're looking at in quantum computing world. The downside of it, of course, is that because calculations can be done so quickly, if you're trying to be nefarious and hack into a system, you can now check millions of things in no time at all. So trying to maintain security in a quantum computing world could be very difficult. I can see a time when, we actually have to go to lo-fi ways of doing security to beat the quantum mechanics, right? It'll get to a point where computing will be so quick that the only way to stop something from being hacked is to physically unplug it. So that something else can't connect.
So basically, artificial intelligence is coming to life, you mean?
Oh,
This will be...
Maybe one day. I don't think quantum mechanics, quantum computing is going to get us there immediately, but maybe one day. I look forward to meeting the Lieutenant Commander Data for real.
Okay, thank you.
We already do that actually in the military. So if there's a computer that you really want to keep safe, you take it off the network, even though we're not in the quantum age now. You just unplug it. It's the safest way to make sure that no one's going to get any information off it. That and screw it to the floor. Any more questions? All gone quiet. Over to you, Dan.
Well, we seem to have run out of questions. This is an interesting contrast to all meeting in a room in the city of London, fueled by beer and pizza. It's a little bit more energetic than this, but I think this has been a success. I would like to send out a survey after to everyone who attended and get your views on that. We'll try to do that in the next week or so. But you can think about it now, because we'll ask you, how well did this work? Was it a good way to spend 90 minutes of your time? What would you like us to do differently? How can we make this work better? Besides the free drinks and the pizza, the physical networking aspects of what we have been doing are very difficult to do in this mode. And we don't have quantum VR headsets yet, so that's not going to fix it. So I'd be very interested in knowing what suggestions people have about how we can, what we've done well, what needs to be done better, and how we can use this kind of format, which maybe, we're all waking up every morning and hoping the news will say, aha, they found a cure, but they keep not doing that. And, those of us who have sort of a scientific background actually know that, well, it's a great idea that there'll be a vaccine by the end of the year. It's also possible there'll never be a vaccine, as there is not a vaccine for some other diseases that we care a lot about. So we may be doing this for a long time, and we're all learning how to make this work. So we'll be asking all of you for input about that, about the content, how well it worked for you, and what we could do better, because we would like to keep the sort of energy that we've had in the face-to-face meetings going. One of the things that we do that's different, and I asked someone this in the meeting, we had a meeting last week of about 5 of us who are planning this, and my question is, why is this different? Because we're doing a webinar. There are lots of webinars. There are 20 webinars every day that we get invited to and don't attend, and and maybe 2 or 3 a week that we agree to attend and then don't. And so why is this different? And the interesting answer was because nobody here is trying to sell you anything. And I thought that was great. And that's kind of the, this isn't a subtle pitch to sell you a software license or a piece of hardware or something like that. We're just talking about ideas, and that's different. And people like that, because certainly there's no end of webinars you can attend where whatever the question is, the answer is buy one of these. So this is great. And I want to thank Michelle for going to the effort of doing this, and for putting up with some of the logistical chaos that we've been experiencing the last few days and figuring out how to make this work. And to thank all of you who may have been confused by WebEx and Zoom and all of that for putting up with that and attending. We're going to try to step this up a bit and do it sort of once a month. But for that to work, because this is nobody's day job to do this, so I'm soliciting, besides your answers on a survey, volunteers to do what Michelle just did. And it's actually easier now that you don't have to travel to Shoreditch to do it. You can do it in the comfort of your garden. So please come back to us with that. I think the information about how to come back to, again, that's not clear. We don't have sign-up sheets that are coherent or anything like that, but we will try to, one of the things we'll ask you on the survey is, are you happy for us to share your information with the other people in the meeting? And that will be a GDPR question, if you like. Because the basic idea is this is a community of people who get benefit by doing this kind of thing together. And that includes contributing. So I hope that some of you will think about that and say, aha, I can give a talk next month, and send me an email tomorrow explaining what that will be about. We'll put you on the air. So I think we're sort of done. Thank you. Any other questions, ideas, thoughts?
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dan, but I would just say that I've really enjoyed tonight tremendously. The only thing I would have suggested is that I would have loved to have had a teeny bit more notice, because I happen to know other people who would have benefited from today, and because of the logistical time, it just wasn't enough time for me to say, oh, by the way, so and so, there's this I think you'd really like to be a part of. It just wasn't practical, unfortunately. So that's the only thing I would have suggested, is just a bit more notice would be great.
Thank you for that. The good news is, as you can see at the top left of your screen, that we're recording it. So we will send you all a link to that, and you can send it to those who might like to watch the replay. That's the best we can do on this one tonight, but thank you. Any other comments right now about that sort of question? What should we be doing differently, or what works well? I think
I have a unrelated question. I was invited here because I went to high school with Michelle. We've been friends for a really long time. We're scientists in very different fields. I am always happy to talk about what I do. I love talking about microbiology. So I don't know if this invitation to talk is specifically for people involved in computing systems, or is that just blanket for everybody?
So I would say that enterprise architecture is the sort of idea of this group. And enterprise architecture is ultimately about systems thinking. It's about what an enterprise architect does is they're meant to understand how to, given some desire for something to change, understand the current state and understand enough about how everything works to describe the future state, and then describe how do we get there with some interesting level of detail. I think that's a pretty fair description. And so if there's some parallels to that in your world, that would be very interesting, because the other thing about this group that is not not special for this group, but typical for a lot of this kind of group, is that although we would like to be generalists to know about everything, most of us are just doing one thing all the time. And so if you're really becoming a great expert on blockchain or payment technology or
even systems thinking and processing in a lab,
yeah, whatever, you would like to learn about some other things that you can incorporate into your own development. So that could be interesting. It would need to be somehow connected with that general theme that I just described.
We can talk later.
Yeah, talk to Michelle. She will help you. She'll help you shape a talk.
I can have a think about it.
Well,
thank you.
And yeah, yes, because it's all science at the end of the day, isn't it?
Mm.
I hope.
Yeah, what we're doing is arch problem solving. So even though I did my PhD in astrophysics, I don't do astrophysics on a day-to-day basis, but I use the skills every day. So problem solving, logic, putting ideas together, talking to people, communication, communicating very difficult ideas in language that people can understand. All of that is used in enterprise architecture.
Well, a real challenge in enterprise architecture is to, and what we were doing in the 1990s, I would say there were about 1,000 of us in different roles and different levels of engagement who were inventing some of these things like TOGAF and similar things. What we're doing is codifying and trying to make repeatable things that people have been doing really well as sort of artistically, if you like. Mm-hmm. They knew how to do these kinds of big projects and how to be successful. And in the 90s, the scale of enterprise computing was becoming big enough that lots of things were not working very well, as Michelle described. And there were some fabulous, famous failures of gigantic IT projects that sank without a trace. And some people in the industry then said, we really must, there are some people who know how to do this. Let's try to extract that and distill that and turn it into some kind of repeatable thing that people can learn how to do. And I would say that's an ongoing project, because there are lots of people who go for things like TOGAF training. We do TOGAF training, and they go through all the thing and they memorize all the stuff and they take the exam and they have a certificate, but they don't necessarily know how to do that kind of work that I just described. They have learned a language and a structure, but we need more people who can. You talked about enterprise architecture, Michelle, as a solution for some of these things. Mm-hmm. What you're really talking about, I would say, is more people who have ways of applying that kind of thinking and structure successfully in this world. And I think we have things to learn from every field of where people are dealing successfully with complexity. So yes.
There's definitely an art to applying the different frameworks and understanding how they work.
There is a view that you can't really go to school and learn how to be Rembrandt, but you can I don't know about that. Why don't you two conspire to come up with a program for us, a theme? It'd be very interesting. So I think we're sort of on the ending point at this point, unless there's more. Don't hear any more. All right, well, thank you very much for coming. We will be reaching out to you and trying to get your feedback on a anonymized basis, if you like, but also your views if you would like to be more forthcoming about what we can do to make this more valuable. And I guess we're done. So good night. My glass is empty.
Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.